观众朋友，大家好，欢迎来到加州竞选特别报道的节目。今天我们为您请来了加州州务卿的候选人 Mark Meuser. Mr. Meuser, welcome to our program.
Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, you have been in our program before, but however, I'm sure that many of our audience still don't know you. So why don't you spend a little time to introduce yourself to our audience?
So my name is Mark Meuser, and I'm running for California Secretary of State, which is the chief election officer of the state of California. They are also the one responsible as Secretary of State to register businesses. So that means any entrepreneur who wants to start a business in the state of California, the first government entity that they will deal with is the Secretary of State. Now, I happen to be an election law attorney, so I have practiced in law in the election field. I've also been a small business owner, so I've dealt with, many of the issues that small businesses deal with. And as an attorney, I've also represented small businesses. So I have an understanding from the business perspective and the election law side of things. On election law, many people know that in 2016, right after the presidential elections, there was a recount in Wisconsin and Michigan, and I was one of the attorneys that was flown out to Wisconsin and Michigan to observe the recounts.
Now, besides what you're running for and your background as attorney, now what do you like as a other part of your life? Do you like sports?
Yeah, I'm an outdoor enthusiast. I love reading history, so I have a lot of very, very, very old history books, biographies, but outdoor enthusiast, whether I'm sailing, hiking, swimming. But of course, I also like to ride bikes, and I've done Ironmans. I used to race bicycles many, many years ago. And so when I decided that I was running for Secretary of State, I decided that it would be a good idea to actually do a tour of all 58 counties of the state of California. And I decided to do it on my bicycle. So I got started on July 9th in the Bay Area, and I started a 46-day 58 county bicycle tour, and I have now visited 50 counties on the bike. I only have 8 more to go, and we're going to be covering those over the next couple days. We'll be ending on August 23rd down in Orange County.
So tell us how you work, right? When you're on the bike, doing your campaign, and your supporters say they're waving a sign and then say, hey, that's our guy, Mark, he's coming. So what do? You stop by and shake your hands and you provide your autograph for them?
Well, it's different. There was one time I was riding up a big hill, and one of my supporters came by and it's like, hey, I know who that is. And they basically got behind me and just put their flashers on and just followed me all the way into town, and kind of got an escort. Sometimes I just pull off the side of the road and have a conversation with somebody. Most of the time people just honk their horn and move on when they recognize me out there. But it's been a lot of great stuff. When I was one time I stopped was down near the border, and there was a border station that I had to cross. It wasn't on the border, it was one of the roving border patrols. And we stopped and had a conversation. I mean, I've talked with PG&E workers. I've talked with, Highway Patrol, Caltrans. I've talked with a lot of people as I've gone through the state of California. I mean, I've ridden 3,000 miles on this tour so far, so there's a lot of people that I've got to interact with, waiters at restaurants. As we've traveled around the state, just got to meet a lot of great people.
So, Mr. Meuser, as a candidate for the Secretary of State, and also your background is election law.
Yes.
So what do you see the issues facing California?
Very good question. To start with, we need to understand what the problem is. The problem starts with looking at how California is ranked among other states. According to the Pew Research Center, the state of California has the second worst elections in the United States of America. And that's measuring it across 14 different measurables. Professors from various universities around the United States have measured our elections, looked at, from provisional ballots to absentee ballots to military voting. They've looked at the measurables, and they've said that California has the second worst elections in the United States of America.
When was that study done?
That study was done 2 years ago, came out in 2016. There will be an updated study that should come out sometime this month of August. And when it does, I'll be more than willing to come out and talk about those results again. But right now we have the second worst elections in the United States of America. Now some people will say, well, that's not good that you're the second worst in the United States, but at least you're in the United States of America, where we have taught the world how to vote, so we must have the best elections in the world. Well, Harvard did a study where they measured the election integrity of every single election in the world. And then they took the 28 Western democracies, and they said, of the 28 Western democracies, United States of America is ranked 28th when it comes to election integrity.
Oh, stop. You mean United States is really at the bottom?
Of the Western world, it is at the bottom.
Of the 28 democracies?
Yes. We have the worst elections in the Western world on election integrity. And some of the reasons why. I mean, you may have seen in the news last week, a 11-year-old was in Las Vegas at a hackers convention, and she proved that she could hack a county's election system and change the vote in about 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
10 minutes, that's all it took her.
Wow.
11-year-old. You may have heard about a month ago, one of the leading vote counting manufacturers came out and said that they had created a backdoor, Wi-Fi enabled way that their machines could be hacked. That's a problem. When people vote, they expect their vote to be counted correctly. And when you hear that an 11-year-old can hack a county's election system, when you hear that companies are purposely putting in ways that the system can be hacked, there's a lot of concern out there from both the right and the left. We saw it in the 2016 presidential elections. Donald Trump, won, but Jill Stein came out and raised a bunch of money, and they did a recount in Michigan and Wisconsin to see if somehow somebody had gotten in there and changed the vote. And so we had to do a manual recount of the ballots throughout the state of Michigan and Wisconsin. And I was in 6 different counties in 2 different states over 8 days during that recount. And I had the ability to watch what was going. And the good news is we did not see that any machines had been tampered with and that the vote had been manipulated. But we did find plenty of other problems as a result of that, and the Michigan legislature had to come out and pass some new laws. They had to kind of change their systems because of that audit, we actually saw that there were some problems with their elections in the integrity of their election system.
Now, what are the problems specifically facing California elections?
Okay. Staying on the part of counting the votes, one of the duties of the Secretary of State is to certify the voting machines, but more importantly is after the votes are counted, the counties are to audit so many precincts, and they do a manual hand count to make sure that nothing happened with that vote. The Secretary of State has an independent audit ability where it could just say, we want to audit this race or we want to audit this. And the current Secretary of State is not using that authority to go do some independent investigations, and he is helping pass laws that reduce the number of audits that are being done in the state of California. So in a day and age where people are more concerned with the with the automatic counting of the vote, he's doing fewer audits and fewer investigations, whereas the exact opposite is what needs to be happening. You need to have more audits, more investigation. We need to bring in some outside groups that both on the right and the left to allow them to audit what the government's doing so that they can give the government a clean bill of health. And yes, we've investigated this election, we've done this research, and we have found that there is no problems with election. When you restore the integrity of the election process, people are much more willing to come out and participate in elections. But when people think that their vote is being stolen by corporate interests or special interests, then they may participate, they may not. They become much more lazy voters when they're not sure that their vote is properly being counted.
So you just talk about that, all this process in the election voting was not properly audited. There's problems that need to be corrected but never done. But what's the reason, causing all these problems? Why didn't the Secretary of State, come out to really correct all these problems?
Well, I can't speak for why they do what they do. There are Secretary of States across the United States. There's, and each one does a different job. And here in the state of California, we are obviously not doing our job because we have the second worst elections in the United States, according to the Pew Research Center. The thing is, there are many aspects of our elections. And we've noticed that voter registration in the state of California happens to be a problem. Now, earlier this year, the state of California filed a brief with the United States Supreme Court where they said, here are 11 different government databases that can be used to clean up the voter rolls. Basically, the Secretary of State can use this database, this database, this database, this database, 11 different government databases. They're allowed to use them, and that way you have as clean voter rolls as possible. That way, if you live in San Francisco, you're registered to vote in San Francisco, not in Alameda. And if you all of a sudden move to Alameda, your voter registration should be canceled in San Francisco, and now you should be registered to vote in Alameda because you want to be registered where you live, right? Well, we looked at what the state of California is doing. There's these 11 different government databases, and the state of California is only using 3 of them. So that means they know of 8 different government databases that they can use to make sure your voter rolls are clean. And what are some of the things that they're not doing? Well, we're not using the Social Security death records. So let's say somebody was a registered voter here in California, but they had family in another state and their health was a little bad, so they went to be with family. They didn't move there, they just went there, spent a couple weeks, and maybe they passed away. There is no mechanism for the county coroner where they passed to get over here to California and remove them from the voter rolls. The way you do that is through the Social Security death records. And we're not using that database, so if somebody passes away out of state, they're not necessarily going to have their name removed from the voter rolls, which creates bloated voter rolls. Now, here's another thing. It's about government communication. We expect our government to work well. We expect it to communicate with each other. Jury service summons. If you live in the United States, you can get served with a jury summons and you have to go down to the courthouse and serve on a jury. Well, the jury summons gets that data from the voter registration logs. So you got the state sending data over to the jury service. They send out the notices. 20% of those get returned. They get returned because it's an undeliverable as addressed, which means it's a bad registration. They passed away, they moved, or maybe that they're not a citizen yet. They got a green card, but they haven't become a citizen. They're not eligible. The thing is, the jury service does not send that data back over to the Secretary of State so that they can clean the database. And so why that's so important is if you are a green card holder, following the rules, trying to become a citizen of the United States of America, according to federal law, you're not allowed to vote, and if you vote, you can be deported from this country.
Do you have any example on that? It actually happened this way?
The courts are full of stories like that. I'll tell you a couple stories here real quick. One was a young lady from South America. She came up to the United States to do nursing school. She had a driver's license because she was a green card holder, and she went in when she was getting her driver's license. The DMV official said, "Would you like to register to vote?" She said, "I don't think I'm allowed to." And he says, "Oh, you just check the box." She checked the box, and sure enough, the state sent her balloting materials. And it's like, "Oh, I must be allowed to vote because the state sent me balloting materials." She voted in 2 elections. She finished nursing school, had a job, was a productive member of society, finally eligible for citizenship, showed up to the court. And the court said, citizenship denied for life, and you are deported. Another story was a young lady.
She was asked to vote by DMV officer.
A government official, and it did not matter. She appealed all the way up the chain, lost it. Every single level. I mean, the judges basically said, you should have known as a non-citizen that you were not eligible to vote. And she voted, and she became ended up being deported. Here's another one. A young lady lived in the Philippines, and she met a U.S. military officer when he was deployed in the Philippines. They fell in love, they got married, he got moved back to the United States, they moved to the United States. She got a driver's license. She didn't even check the boxes. She just, filled out the form and then left the boxes blank of, I'm a U.S. citizen and I want to vote. She left that blank. Evidently the DMV official checked it. For her, and they could tell because it was a different signature or different handwriting, different pencil or whatever. The state sent her balloting materials because now she was registered to vote. Oh, I must be able to vote. She voted. Came time for her citizenship. Didn't matter that she was married to a military officer. Didn't matter that she didn't actually check the box. All she did was go out and vote. What ended up happening is the judge said citizenship denied for life, and oh, by the way, you're deported back to the Philippines. So, and these are not stuff that happened 10, 15 years ago. This is stuff that happened just 2-3 years ago.
Wow, that's a horrible story.
And that's why, as the Secretary of State, it is so important that when we find out from like jury service poll that somebody is on our voter rolls who is not a citizen, we need to remove them from the voter rolls to protect them, to make sure that the state's not sending them balloting materials and they make an honest mistake that ends up costing them their American dream.
So, Mr. Meuser, we heard a lot of stories about the voter, like over 100% voter registration, that kind of voting rate.
Yes.
What caused those problems?
Voter registration, bloated voter rolls, as we call them. There's many different ways that it can happen, but one way is when somebody dies and they don't remove your name from the voter rolls. Another way that it can happen is when somebody moves and they don't remove your name from the voter rolls. Duplicate voter registrations, where somebody is registered to vote more than once at the same address. It could happen when somebody gets married. They're registered under their maiden name and their married name. There are such things as a fictitious voter registration. People who get paid to register people to vote and they don't get their quotas, and they sometimes they create fictitious voter registrations, maybe for Mickey Mouse or for Donald Duck or the Dallas Cowboy football team. We've heard those type of stories. We also see the fictitious voter registrations happen like miniature golf business establishments that have 19 people registered to vote there. Those are called fictitious voter registrations. And then of course when non-citizens get on the voter rolls. And so this creates bloated voter rolls. It creates extra government waste because every person that we send balloting material to, that is, costs about $4 per person. So there's a waste of money that happens when you have bloated voter rolls.
So do you have any statistics showing which jurisdiction have the highest voter registration, overall voter registration?
There's a lawsuit going on right now here in the state of California, and in that federal lawsuit they are claiming that LA County has 144% voter registration. San Diego County has 138% voter registration. They actually say that there are 11 counties in the state of California with over 100% voter registration.
Wow. So if you're elected, how are you going to fix all these problems?
Well, the way how we fix it is it starts with database management. It's just anything that any big business has to deal with. If you got garbage in for data, you're going to have, bad data. And so what we need to do is we need to start cleaning up our voter rolls. And you do that by being proactive with, if somebody has passed away, you compare your voter rolls with the Social Security death records to remove those people from the voter rolls. Why do we need to do that? Because there are people like special interest who would, if there's going to be a very close election, because the state of California does not require you to have voter ID, what that means is somebody can go in and say, hey, I'm Donald Smith of 123 Main Street, and they just hand you a ballot, you sign it, and you go vote. Well, Donald Smith may have been dead for 15 years, and they know, the person who wants to steal an election, and they're not going to go steal an election that's going to be won by a 20-point landslide. That does them no good. They're going to go in and they'll do with like a city council race or a county supervisor races, some little small race where one or two people can go out and cast 4 or 5 illegal votes and maybe change an election. And I have talked to many people around the state who have actually gone in to vote, and they've seen that their dead grandfather or their dead father-in-law has already voted. Somebody came in and said, hey, I'm so-and-so, and they were able to vote for that person. And that dilutes the vote of citizens who have the right to vote, because now their vote's not counting as much because somebody else is out there voting multiple times. That's why we need to clean up the voter rolls of like people who have died, so that you take away that tool of special interest of manipulating close elections.
So you think that it's a good idea when the voter go to vote, they need to show their ID?
There are a lot of people out there on both sides of the aisle that do not understand why we do not have voter ID. Now, as Secretary of State, I do not get to vote on whether or not we have voter ID. I enforce the law, which means the legislature passes it, and some states, the legislature has passed voter ID laws, and those Secretary of States have to enforce it. California has chosen not to do that, so I can't make people show voter ID, but we do have a problem with voter integrity in the state of California, and I think that is one of many issues that the legislature needs to look at in order to maybe make some changes to increase the integrity of our elections. There's no one magic bullet. There's many things that we need to look at, but voter ID is definitely something that needs to be looked at in the state of California, especially with the amount of fraud that I'm hearing about as I campaign in the state of California, as I've been going up and down the state on my bicycle, and before that in a car. I've talked to a lot of people and who come to me with firsthand accounts of how they have observed election fraud, and there's a lot of people out there who really want to increase the integrity of our elections, and they believe the best way to do that is with a voter ID. And the legislature needs to do that, or a ballot proposition needs to make that happen. And if we did that, I think it could have a very good positive effect on the elections here in the state of California.
Well, Mr. Meuser, thank you for coming to our program, and good luck on your campaign.
Well, thank you very much. I guess got to get on the bike and head on out again.